Oh, oh, something is definitely not right here. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the show. So glad to see you once again. And if you're new here, thank you for stopping by. This is the show where we talk about each and every episode of a show that we grew up on in the 90s and talk about it now, 25 plus years later. And right now we're working our way through Superman, the animated series. So if this sounds like something you might enjoy, then hop below and hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of the episodes. Like today's show, where we are going to be reviewing A Brave New Metropolis, which originally aired on September 27th, 1997.
So how's it work?
I wish I could tell you.
This is a fantastic episode, and it's really exciting to see the types of episodes that are coming out, especially when you really sit down and watch the episodes. Watch the show through episode by episode. You get to see how the style was changing and the direction and the writing and all those things are coming together to really shape this show to be something really enjoyable. And like this episode, where it takes us to a whole nother dimension. In Batman the Animated Series, it was always kind of rooted in real life. Even when they kind of dabbled in the mystical, it felt like a little bit outside of the norm for the show. But in Superman, we've been seeing a trend to going into all sorts of different directions. And this one takes us to a whole nother dimension, provides an opportunity to tell sort of an Elseworld story within the context of Superman. And we'll talk all about that right after our 60-second rundown of the episode. I'm going to give you a synopsis of the entire episode in 60 seconds or less before the Brainiac bomb explodes. Here we go. Star Labs has created a device to be able to look into different dimensions, but it's not working real well because it sucks Lois into an alternate dimension where the Metropolis looks totally different and run down and not good. And a big announcement comes on that it's curfew time, and Lois sees a big statue of Luthor and Superman working together. And Superman shows up, but he's not the same Superman that we know. He's wearing a black suit and he's working with police force, and he's taking down this gang very violently. And Jimmy Olsen, who looks a little different, has long hair and straggly and such, comes and gets her and says, yeah, you're supposed to be dead, and takes her to this hold up, the resistance that they're working with. And Mercy, who is Luthor's assistant, finds Lois and goes, wait a minute, Lois is alive. She was supposed to be dead when the Interpol gang captured her and blew her up in a car bomb, and Superman wasn't able to save her, and he went off the deep end, and he is now trying to save himself and finding a new way. So he starts working with Luthor. I knew I wasn't going to get this one. So he's working with Luthor, and Luthor says, well, we can't have him find out that Lois is still alive, so go and find her and kill her. And then she ends up on top of the monument, and Superman comes in and goes, oh, I thought you were dead. And he tells her the whole thing, how his heroic ways wasn't doing any good, so he found another means of being able to work together. And they come up to a final confrontation with Lex, and they fight and they battle, and Superman eventually takes down Lex. And then he's talking with Lois, and he's going, you know, I always loved you, and I didn't realize it until you were gone. And she kisses him, and then the real Superman breaks through the barrier and is calling for her and pulls her back in, and she asks him out on a date so that she doesn't miss her opportunity like they did in the other dimension. Whew. Complicated episode.
Well, at least some things are the same around here.
If you know anything about me, you probably know that I'm a big sci-fi fan. I love different elements of sci-fi, other dimensions and time travel and mechs and robots and aliens and all those kinds of things in the sci-fi world. And so it's episodes like this that I get really excited about, because as much as I like Batman and I like the mystery and the film noir and those elements, it is a very different thing when you start talking about aliens and robots and dimensions and traveling across intergalactic territory and things like that. And those are things that are happening in this show. And I think it took them a little bit to get to that spot where they could tell those stories. And this one is no exception, where we get to travel to a Elseworld style story like they've done in the comics many times. and tell this different story from a different perspective of Metropolis, and seeing Superman not necessarily as a bad guy, but just having different means to get the same result that he does in the home world, dimension that we see.
I had to take control. There was no other way.
And it does remind me a little bit of Superman Red Sun, I think it's called, where it tells the Elseworld story of Superman growing up in Russia versus America and how that changes and alters his ways of doing things. And even his suit resembles some of what they use in the comics. I feel like there was a story too where he was growing up in Nazi Germany. And so that suit, like even the SS, kind of reminds me of the Nazis or something like that. It's certainly, I feel like this episode pulled influence from the comics. And although they don't directly say, hey, this is an Elseworld story, they kind of tell an Elseworld story, masking it around by putting it in a different dimension.
I've wondered if there were other dimensions out there.
And I really enjoy that towards the beginning of this episode, when Lois first ends up in the other dimension, they avoided a very common trope that always drives me nuts in movies and TV shows, is that they just got done explaining to Lois that, hey, this is a window into another dimension, and here's how we can, look through this portal into other dimensions. And they explain to her what's going on. And then she gets sucked in, although that was a shock to go, oh man, I'm sucked in. She didn't spend 5 minutes wandering around this new Metropolis going, what's going on? What happened? How did I get here? This is so... She knew. And even when Turpin came up, and it was a different type of Turpin working for the curfew department or whatever it was, she just plays along.
Oh, yeah, it's right here in my Oh, whoops, no purse.
Rather than going, I don't understand. How did I get here? Confusion always bothers me. I shouldn't say always, but it often bothers me in shows. It's like, why is everybody got to be so confused all the time? They avoided that. I say all that just to say that they avoided that in this, that she just jumps in and plays along. She sees Jimmy Olsen and goes, yeah, I'm Lois. I don't know any different. So it worked really well in this episode.
So I am Lois Lane, but I am not the Lois you knew.
And this also dabbles in another kind of sci-fi element, and that is the butterfly effect of one thing skews the entire chain reaction of events. Kind of the Back to the Future thing, where just because Biff was able to get the almanac in this time frame, it changes the entire outcome of the world from there on after.
Oh, that's all in the past. You mean the future? Whatever!
And the same thing with this, where we have Lois is not saved by Superman in the car explosion, and that sends him off in a different path and reacts to that differently than he had when he did save her, and has him making totally different choices than he did if she was still alive. And all of that is a chain reaction that sends the whole entire Metropolis into a different skew of events.
You did this because of me?
And it gives an opportunity to tell that what if sort of story where Superman and Luthor are teamed up. One of the things that always works for me with Luthor is that he is your classic villain who is a hero in his own mind. He's doing what he believes is right and is looking out for the betterment of the world, but just a little power hungry, and his intentions are a little wrong in the sense of what he's trying to accomplish. And then we have Superman, kind of his polar opposite, that is also trying to do the right thing, but has a different moral code that he is holding the standards to. So what if we took those two characters and just put their motives in the same line and link them up? Now what would the world look like? And that's what this story is able to do. It is able to tell, because of this one event that happens, puts Superman in a place of going, man, maybe I should join up with Luthor. He's got the resources and I've got the power, then let's work together. And we get to see what that outcome would be as a what if sort of storyline.
Something troubling you?
I'm having trouble with your job performance.
And then after all that, it's nothing like a little bit of parallel dimension to bring two people together. It's kind of fun that there's a positive outcome to all this, that because this version of Superman has lost Lois, that he is able to see what his life is like without Lois in there, and regrets having never told her how his true feelings were, which is what we're experiencing in the Earth 1, or whatever you want to call it, where Superman and Lois obviously have feelings for each other, and they started to kind of dabble in that flirtatious elements of their characters. But Superman is able to express to Lois, the other Lois, that what his life is like without her in it. And I find it interesting that the first time we get to see Lois and Superman kiss is when she's kissing the alternate Superman, which is kind of a interesting little twist there. But she uses that motivation to go back to the regular Superman and be the bigger person and ask him out on a date.
I could explain it over dinner.
Dinner? Aren't we getting a little personal?
Better now than never.
So when it comes time to rank this episode, it is a lot of fun. It is a very different story than we've seen told in a lot of the episodes, but we're going more in this direction. Heavy sci-fi, heavy Elseworld, what if kind of storyline, and just kind of a whimsy of it, of being able to flip Metropolis on its end and have a lot of fun seeing what else could be going on in Metropolis in another dimension because of this one event. And so it makes for a great story. We get to see a different side of the characters. It pushes Lois and Clark, Superman, even further in their relationship, and just a lot of great things. And so for that reason, I have bumped this episode to the top of the list at the number 1 spot of my favorite episodes so far. I do have, in fact, it beating out Way of All Flesh, because this episode, I think, is a stronger representation of what the type of stories that you can get out of Superman. It's interesting working on this list because I feel like there's very different types of episodes. And maybe I should do a ranking of season 1 and season 2 because they're very different types of episodes. And Way of All Flesh kind of falls in that bracket where it's like, that was an episode that was really good for a Batman style kind of villain versus Superman kind of story based in kind of real world elements with robots, versus this story, which is totally night and day difference. It's almost like it's another dimension to be able to tell a story like this, which on its own is just a better use of Superman as a grouping of stories, I guess you could say.
I don't think so.
So there's a lot of Elseworld stories in the comic books, and and I did a review of the Gotham by Gaslight, which is a Batman Elseworld type story. But what is your favorite Elseworld story? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoy what you see here, then please click the like button. If you want to see more episodes like this, just hit subscribe, because I have new episodes reviewing Superman the Animated Series every Tuesday and Thursday, so you don't want to miss an episode. Like what we have coming up next, Monkey Fun, so you don't want to miss that. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm Andy Knode. I'll see you soon.